Gaat u zitten. Or you can sit over there, if that's... Okay. Welcome. This ceremony will be in English, and we have several opponents from abroad, so we have to see that we stick to the allotted time. And Mr. Candidate, I see you there. Well, welcome here in Leiden. You're from Ghana now?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
You understand me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you confront a committee which was appointed by the Council of Deans, and that is charged with the task of examining both your dissertation and the propositions submitted therewith. And Professor George Akankik from the University of Ghana will start the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Good morning
Welcome
to you
here
all.
in Leiden.
Thank you. Timothy, a friendly question. You know about the Disability Act of Ghana, Act 715 of 2006. It is a legislation meant to address issues that constrain the lives of people living with disabilities. Now, from your vast experience working with the deaf community and bearing in mind the critical elements of deaf culture, do you think the inclusion of the deaf in this legislation is well conceived?
Yeah, Hilad, the opponent, thank you very much for the question. I would say no, but to be a little bit political, I think that the government this is the government's initial attempt to provide protection and access to services, ensuring that deaf individuals are not excluded from the support afforded to other disabled persons. However, we must acknowledge some critical issues. For example, deaf culture view deafness not merely as a disability, but as a unique linguistic and cultural identity. So sometimes this perspective can clash with the disability framework. Moreover, I think that there's a lack of specific provisions tailored to the deaf community, such as recognizing Ghanaian Sign Language as an official sign language or ensuring access to sign language interpreters. The way forward I think, is to engage the deaf community more actively when it comes to legislative processes and ensuring that their insight shapes policies and that their needs are genuinely reflected. Yeah. Thank you.
We have time for still another question, if you want.
Okay, I'll have another go. And this is on the government of Ghana's ideology on language in education policies. No research has shown that when you start a child off in the L1 in education, it benefits the child. And as a result of that, nations all over the world insist that the mother tongue is included in their language of education policies. Now, Ghana hasn't done badly. It recognizes 7 Ghanaian languages in this policy. But interestingly, Ghanaian Sign Language, which is the L1 of the deaf people here in Ghana, is not included. I'd like to have your comments on this issue.
Thank you. I think that the exclusion of Ghanaian Sign Language is a significant oversight with profound implications for deaf education in the country. Because for deaf children, Ghanaian Sign Language serves as their L1. So excluding Ghanaian Sign Language from the educational policy effectively marginalizes deaf students, denying them the same educational advantages afforded to their hearing peers. I feel that this exclusion can lead to a range of negative outcomes, such like limited access to education or their cognitive development, or limited to social interaction. However, the inclusion of Ghanaian Sign Language in the educational policy of Ghana is not just a matter of educational equity, but recognizing the linguistic rights of these deaf individuals. So by embracing it in the educational policy, we ensure that deaf children in Ghana are really empowered with the education that they need to succeed.
Very well, thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you very, very much. Then the examination shall be continued by Dr. Morgan from the University of Hamburg. Welcome here in Leiden.
Thank you. Waarde Kandidaat, dear candidate Timothy. So I want to ask about this notion of a triglossic language situation in Ghana. This is something that was very compelling to me in the thesis. And also thinking about how it might be able to be applied in different places, especially in an African context. For example, I see clear parallels in Kenya. And I know that it took a lot of work to get to this point where you find that this theory has explanatory power in Ghana. And so my question is, what next steps might you see for this theory, using it either in research questions, other things to explore, or in a more applied way in Ghana, for example, in education or in some other way? How do you see using this particular theory?
Gal Hilliard, the opponent, thank you very much. The notion of triglossial language situation in Ghana for deaf signers opens up a promising avenue for both future research and practical application. And I believe not only in Ghana, but in other African contexts, especially African contexts where they share the same historical background like Ghana. When it comes to comprehensive study, I'm concerned about applying investigating whether the triglossic model, which include Ghanaian Sign Language, English, the local spoken language, applies to deaf communities in other African countries, like you said, Kenya. I feel that comprehensive studies can reveal common patterns and unique differences, helping refine the models and applicability across diverse contexts. However, when it comes to applied stuff in education, I feel that the model would, if the model is acknowledged in educational policy or curriculum development, it will really help in creating inclusivity. I also feel that it could be included in interpreters training or teacher training. Already in Ghana, the government has a policy that teacher training institutions should have sign language as a requirement. This have not really started because of lack of resources. So I believe that with linguists coming on board, such a triglossic model, if it's incorporated into the education of interpreters and teacher training, would really create inclusivity to other deaf signers who use these variants or may not be particularly familiar with other variants. Thank you.
Dr. Morgan, do you still have another question? There's a few minutes left.
Yes, please. I would like to have a follow-up on the same topic. I'm curious if you have already presented this notion to people in Ghana, especially deaf signers, and what kind of feedback you're getting. Yes, do they understand the idea of a triglossia and how it might be a consequence of the colonial era, and what are their thoughts? I'm just kind of curious about what you've heard, your communications.
Yes, indeed, I have presented the idea of triglossia to them. Those who are a little bit involved in linguistics were really fascinated by the discovery and even shared some examples and domains in which they will use what. Others not oriented with linguistics were a little bit reserved, mainly due to their judgment that a particular variant cannot be considered as a language. As such, they acted very surprised at me considering really studying this and bringing up to the limelight, because these are variants they would like to cover up. But my research, I'm really interested in opening up. So they were a little bit reserved with that. However, I think what I have not done, as you said, is I haven't really engaged them with the notion or linking the triglossia in spoken language and the role of colonial era to them. But I feel that indeed, if I think that I add triglossia in spoken language and also the role of colonial language with my result, maybe it could really open up for them to feel that, oh, okay, so this is a language process situation that could also happen in spoken language, and it's not it's not unique to them. And I think it could open up their comfort and how they reflect on it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're satisfied? Okay.
Yes.
Then the examination shall be continued by Dr. Nick Freeman from the University of Central Lancashire. Welcome here also, Leiden.
Dear candidate, I really want to congratulate you on producing such a significant and highly original piece of work. I particularly like the use of parallel studies for size and shape specifiers, looking at GSL users alongside hearing gestures and adding ideological perspectives. This really pushes the field forward and will, I'm sure, inspire others to adopt similar approaches to documentation. My questions relate to your lexo-statistical studies in Chapter 3. Despite my misgivings about the history of lexico-statistical studies in our field, I was delighted by the way you use different data sets and was thrilled to see that you find differences between formal GSL and informal GSL, with formal GSL more similar to ASL and informal GSL more similar to Ada Sign Language and Nana Sign Language. I'd like to ask two questions. Many of the studies that you cite at the start of Chapter 3 describe lots of lexical variation in the sign languages of Ghana. Did any of the data sets that you used feature lexical variants? For example, did the Ghanaian sign language list just one variant per concept? Did the informal GSL users all provide the same variant for each concept? If not, how did you deal with this in the analysis? Related to this, given what you have learned, if you were to design a fresh lexico-statistical study from scratch tomorrow, what would this look like?
Yeah, so, dear Hilad, the opponent, thank you very much. Indeed, if I am supposed to conduct a fresh lexical statistical study, the approach will be a little bit different. But to answer the first question, there were less lexical variations, especially I use secondary data, dictionaries that have been produced, There were really less lexical variations depicted in the secondary data. In the primary data, I believe that the approach in which I used by showing them picture tags to elicit signs from them, and the instruction which was given was not, well, did not encourage them to actually use other variants or lexical variations in the study. So indeed, with my discovery of the Ghanaian Sign Language situation, where we have different variants all engulfed under GSL, I think that if I'm supposed to reconduct the study, I'll be more open up to ethnographic study research, where participants will be more open to share different variants in which they know and how they perceive or the domain in which they may prefer to use one variant over the other. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Did you have another question?
I think that's everything for now. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Then the discussion will be continued by Professor Nancy Kula from Leiden University.
Thank you very much. Timothy, I also would like to congratulate you on a really nice piece of work that is very detailed. We haven't had many studies where we see and learn something about the history of Ghanaian Sign Language. I found it really fascinating, and I'm sorry that you couldn't be with us today to discuss some of your work a little bit further. I have a question which is mainly to do with methodology, but I hope that maybe this is a window for us to understand the language ideologies that you sort of investigate, particularly in Chapter 5. So you have contrasting findings on linguistic practices when you use different methodologies. So in evaluating social linguistic variables of gender, age, education on participants, asking them to respond with respect to whether they prefer space-based or body-based size and shape specifiers. So do you think that the observation-based way of doing work, so the ethnographic approach, could play a much more important role in this work? So when they're interviewed, the participants prefer a space-based approach, but then what they actually practice is something slightly different. So they prefer the body-based approach. In Chapter 6, you tell us about using questionnaires and focus groups, and there you talk about observation in a way where you say this is not a formal way of capturing data, and you have informal elicitation. So I would like to push you a little bit to say, do we think observation is actually a really important and legitimate methodology that we use? And also for you to consider, in your views, the different methodologies that you use, what do they bring to the study?
Hiliada opponent, thank you very much. Yes, I agree that when participants are asked to respond to specific questions about their linguistic preference, it is indeed possible that their response are influenced or primed by the context of the interview itself. This phenomenon, of course, can lead to discrepancies between self-reported preference and actual linguistic behavior observed in natural setting. For instance, participants might indicate a preference for body-based size and shape specifiers during an interview due to social desirability or perceived norms or specific framing of the question. However, I believe that employing a mixed approach that combines interviews, surveys, or ethnographic observation can provide a more comprehensive understanding of the linguistic practices. Whilst interviews can reveal participants' explicit attitude and ideology, I believe that ethnographic observation can validate and contextualize these self-reported with actual usage pattern. So, understanding this complexity requires a nuanced methodological approach that considers both self-reported data and observed practices. And finally, I think that by combining multiple methods, we can gain a richer or more nuanced understanding of the language used and the factors that influence it. Thank you.
Can I have another one?
Rest some time, yes.
Yes, excellent. So, of course, one of the hazards of writing a very fantastic thesis is because you make us ask questions which are beyond the thesis. And I know your discussion talked a little bit about education, but it wasn't precisely on that. But I would like to ask you a little bit on that. So you very briefly discuss about classroom contexts with the observation that space-based SASS, in your abbreviation, are preferred in the classroom. When the learners are outside the classroom, the deaf community tend to use body-based signing amongst themselves. So they tend to seem to do different things. And you say that this reflects nuanced dynamics of SAS usage within different contexts. And in this case, in the classroom situation, they do something different than what they did in the interview. And I'm kind of interested in knowing whether you think the classroom situation presents a different context that results in these different findings, in contrast to when sort of they were interviewed.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, in the classroom, the structured environment and academic focus might necessitate the use of space-based size and shape specifier, basically for clarity and precision when they use space for clarity and precision. But in contrast, the community setting allows for more relaxed and cultural ingrained body-based size and shape expression.
If you have not a question, you can ask.
Just a tiny little follow-up, because of course in other studies we know now that there's a lot of talk of multilingual pedagogies. So using the classroom as a space where you can have many different languages that are used for teaching. And one of the things that you show very nice across your whole thesis is how there are different kinds of languages, so the local, as well as the more formal GSL, as well as ASL. Do you conceptualize a moment, or that it would be really useful in the classroom situation with respect to pedagogy, to use a sort of multilingual approach to sort of delivering teaching?
Yes, thank you. Yes, by incorporating both body-based and space-based size and shape specifier in the classroom, I feel that educators can ensure that students understand and retain information more effectively. This approach would bridge the gap between formal education and their everyday communication. I really do believe that incorporating this multi-approach would enhance academic learning and respect and integrate the cultural and linguistic practices of the deaf community. And by bridging this gap between formal education and everyday communication, we can really create a more inclusive and effective educational environment for deaf learners.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Then the examination shall be continued by Dr. Azeb Amha from the University of Leiden.
Thank you. Meneer de Kandidaat, congratulations with your interesting, readable and thorough research on Ghanaian Sign Language. I really enjoyed reading it. Your study is strong in methodology and methods. In nearly all chapters, you have dedicated sections in which you discuss what kind of data that you used and how you develop your main argument in the chapter. You provide detailed information on the participants, your considerations in selecting them, and also you reflect your own positionality. I would like to express my appreciation for that. And my questions are also related to these issues. In chapter 1, page 39, last paragraph, you note the selection criteria excluded deaf individuals who reported learning sign language at a late stage in life. And I wondered how late is late stage in learning sign language or in acquiring sign language? And I wondered also if there is any scientific reason motivating the exclusion of late learners in your, in your analysis. Predictably, my question stems from what I know in spoken language. In spoken language, some people learn late, so 4 is a late age. Some learn about around 7 when there is the medical and other staff get a bit worried. But in sign language, how does this work? I am asking this question because in spoken language, whether people learn language late or not, they can turn out to be proficient speakers, writers in that language. So excluding them in language use matters like on shape and size, which is the focus of your thesis, it would not be reasonable to exclude such late learners. And I wondered how this is in sign language. Are there known trends or cases of correlating, higher late stage learning, higher in age, and less proficiency in signing? Could you explain that for me? Thank you.
Dear Hilde, opponent, thank you very much. I totally agree with your observation. Indeed, if I was supposed to redo this study, I wouldn't exclude the signer, that particular signer, considering the turnout of the chapters I developed from the fieldwork. But at that time, there was a particular agenda in mind that drove me to that decision, and that was mainly comparing gestures with signs. If I recall, that particular participant was already an adult when she became deaf and immersed herself within the deaf community. That background alone made me feel that she may have been heavily influenced by the gestural environment. Similarly, I also excluded gesturers who were familiar with sign language. So the motive at that time was to have a gesturer who had no heavy influence from sign language, and the same applied to a signer who had not had heavy influence from the gestural environment due to him being a postlingual deaf individual. However, if I was supposed to redo the study as I've already noted, I wouldn't have excluded that particular participant because I totally agree with your observation with spoken languages. Thank you.
Do we have another question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. It's also related. There was, in page 36, 37, you state yourself being an outsider and an insider. You did primary education with signing speakers, and because of that you are insider, but also as someone who speaks language, you are somewhat outsider, and you show that had impacted your research. So in page 37, for example, you note that being insider, outsider did add a distinct and valuable dimension to your research. And at the same time, when you were in focus group discussions, in your presence, people acted differently in signing. So participants made different choices in your presence, and that because of that you have made adjustments to your research. So I wondered about what kind of adjustments were these, and there are also some insider-outsider positions that you say are advantageous for research. Could you elaborate a little more on that? What were the adjustments you made, and what are the exact advantages of, in this case, insider-outsider? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. With regards to the adjustments made, in my next focus group discussion, I decided to make a deaf assistant lead the discussion without my direct involvement in the discussion. However, I also made a follow-up discussion immediately after such formal interviews to understand certain concepts I noticed. I feel that the language ideology within the deaf community, especially with the triglossic framework, is that when they have a particular variant they prefer to use in formal settings, and a particular variant they prefer to use in domestic settings. So if you're an outsider and you approach them, certainly they are going to use the formal variant with you. And that switch could change. If you are an insider, then they may prefer to use the informal variant with you. But with the example I gave, being both an outsider and insider, then there was this clash of situation when to use what. So, for example, with regards to their language choice, based upon the findings, I now know that they typically use the GSL variant known as English and Broken with Me. But in a particular focus group discussion, they did not use English. They preferred to rather use Broken and Local with Me. So you get the impression that based upon the context or how familiar or unfamiliar they are with you, they may decide to switch.
Okay, thank you very much. Then the examination shall be continued by Dr. Martin Kosman from Leiden University. If one of the opponents has another question to ask after him, then there is the possibility. So prepare for that, please.
Dank u, meneer rector. Waarde kandidaat, I'd like to, to extend my congratulations to you. As has already been said by others, this is a very well researched, very well analyzed piece of work, and it looks at GSL really from an impressive array of viewpoints. It was a great pleasure and I learned a lot from reading it.
Thank you.
My question pertains to triglossia, I should say again, but from a little bit of a different point of view. Studies of languages like Arabic, which are typically described in the framework of diglossia, etc., have long pointed to the existence of intermediate forms between high and low. So I remember well, Badawi had about 8 different stages between the high and the low things. Now, that was the olden times, and in slightly more recent research by people like Boussoufari Omar and Reem Bassioni, they have suggested that these intermediate forms are in fact a kind of a code switching register, so that we basically have 2, let's say, lects, the high standard Arabic and the low vernacular Arabic, and that the intermediate variants are not variants on their own that we should essentialize as languages on their own, if you want, but rather hybrid variants, code switching registers where you got a grammatical basis mostly in the low variant and insertion of elements from many different kinds, so lexical, phrasal, or everything that the code switching theories allow for, into this framework. These kind of intermediate variants sometimes have names in the Arab world, so they have been, as we could call it, unregistered as variants on their own, but still they would linguistically be rather a performance of dynamically putting together linguistic, 2 different language things. Now, I would be interested to know how this, if such a way of looking at these intermediate registers could be interesting or just wrong or just fantastic, in order to describe the situation in GSL. So English being the high variant, local being the low variant, and broken not being a variant on its own, essentialized as basically a language on its own, but a combination, a code-switching combination of the two levels. Would be very interested to hear your opinion about this.
Who cleared the opponent? Thank you. Yeah, with this question, I believe that I may need more research data to ascertain or deny such comparison. Indeed, I may strive for a follow-up study on this. But indeed, I have also already projected that Broken do incorporate elements from English and local. The Broken GSL might involve more complex and variable insertions from English. These can include not only the vocabulary, but also the syntactic structure influenced by the English grammar. I also believe that the specifics of how elements are integrated and the degree of variability may differ from the Arabic situation, really reflecting the unique linguistic and sociocultural dynamics of the GSL signing community. But in all being said, I believe that I will seriously need a follow-up research to really ascertain or deny this kind of comparison. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There's some time left.
Shall I ask another question? Yes. So, I got another question, which is more of a detail thing, but I was just interested in hearing your opinion about this. You have your judgment experiment, where you use signs as performed by one single anonymized person. And but it's always the same person doing the signs. Now, some of the questions that you ask are, let's say, involving visible features of people, like age. You can have an idea when you see somebody about, or you have let's say, a stereotyped idea about how a more aged or a less aged person would look like. As you're asking for stereotypes, that is not problematic at all. Now, when doing that, as the designer is always the same, you ask your judges to make quite a big abstraction. So they have to think about the sign as an isolated thing, basically not related to the person who is signing. So this is of course, this is a thing that lots of judgments tasks do, so it's not problematic. I don't consider it problematic either. But I would like to know, or maybe you could reflect a little bit on to what extent you think that this kind of demanding of abstraction to people who may not have thought about these kind of things in that way before. So basically, asking people to put a stereotype not on a whole signing situation, but on a specific instance of the form of the sign, and how far that would have influenced their judgments.
Yes, thank you. I do believe that when participants are required to judge signs without the usual contextual clues, they engage in a more abstract form of thinking. And this can influence their judgment in several ways, as you rightly said. For example, on the focus on linguistic forms or reduction of biases. This, I believe, can lead to a more objective judgment based upon the signs themselves rather than the perceived characteristics of the signer. And so, indeed, I do acknowledge the challenge there, but I felt that it also helped the signers to really have an objective judgment by just looking at the signs themselves without the without the presence of an actual environmental characteristics of the signer.
Thank you very much. That was very clarifying.
Thank you very much. Then my question to the opponents is whether there is one opponent or two who have another question to pose to the candidate. You're welcome.
Okay, dear candidate, I want to ask you, and it's linked with your propositions, sorry. So number 9 you mention in your propositions, it says that you feel it's very important to think about the LGBTQ plus community and you want more research in the Ghanaian context, and I completely agree. Which themes do you feel need more research in this particular context?
Yes, dear Hilda, opponent, thank you very much. I think that, I would have been interested in background of people and their social background, especially when it comes to gender, comes to age, and cultural and religious background, and actually tease out the ideologies within the community. And I actually came up with this when I heard that the government of Ghana has imposed a law on, I've not currently read all of the bill the government passed, but I did felt that there were a lack of research, especially based upon an anecdotal report and how the African community and the Ghanaian society react to these topics, and without detailed information from a scientific background. So indeed, I felt that it would be nice to really elicit, different aspects and themes related to the same issue, and find out scientifically how people approach these issues in the community. I'm not sure if I've answered you correctly. You could let me know.
Are you satisfied, or?
That's great, thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay. Well, I myself am not a specialist in sign language, but I want to express my appreciation for the 2 interpreters here present and the 3 interpreters abroad. So thank you very much for your contribution to this ceremony. And I want to express again my appreciation. Thank you very much for that. So is there a last question from one of the opponents? Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, so you talk a little bit about laughter in your thesis, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about the quality of this laughter. So you say that the reason why sometimes participants or signers didn't use body-based sign specifiers was because it created laughter, in particular when it was in the lower part of the body. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, something about the quality of this laughter, because when we talk, we also laugh. Is there something specific about this laughter that makes us think it's something to do with language? And then the second question is to do with frequency. So in terms of the words that you have, is it the case that there's much more frequency of lower body part signs rather than the upper part? Because one of the things in your interview results, you sort of say that they preferred, when they were asked, body-based, they preferred the space-based because they wanted to avoid the body-based part because it caused this laughter. So then I wondered whether in terms of frequency and lexicon, is it the case that there's many more words to do with the lower part of the body than the upper part?
Okay, the opponent, thank you for the question. With regards to the laughter, it's more like a mockery where they mock one another. And I see it as
Ora est.
Sorry, we have to interrupt. Thank you for your answer, but we have to stop here. Mr. Candidate, we have examined your dissertation and the propositions. Sorry? Okay. The time allotted to the examination of your dissertation and its propositions has passed. This committee will withdraw in order to deliberate, and I request you and your company to await our return here. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Candidate, we have examined your dissertation and the propositions appended thereto. We have heard your defense and we have considered the report concerning your previous studies. On the basis of this, we have decided to admit you to the doctorate. And Professor Victoria Niest, your promoter, is entitled and empowered to confer that dignity upon you in the customary fashion.
Volgaarne aanvaard ik de taak mij door de rector magnificus der universiteit opgedragen. Uit kracht dan van de bevoegdheid ons bij wet toegekend volgens het besluit van de commissie, hier tegenwoordig, verklaar ik u bij deze u, Timothy Mac-Hadjah, te bevorderen tot doctor. Ten bewijze hiervan zal u het diploma door rector, secretaris en promotor ondertekend en met het grootzegel der universiteit bevestigd ter hand worden gesteld. De paranyms. I think the paranyms will... Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Having completed the duty assigned to me, I may be the first to address you as doctor and to congratulate you on the award of the dignity you have obtained. This honorable distinction is a well-deserved and highly valued privilege. At the same time, you are called upon never to lose sight of the obligations it imposes on you in the name of science and society.
Okay. Gaat u zitten?
Esteemed Dr. Hadjah, dear Tim, congratulations once again on your beautiful thesis. In it, you describe how one sign language variety may eclipse another one. The fact that we are not able to all be present here today is a shame in both its figurative and its literal meaning. However, we should not allow it to eclipse the great achievement we are celebrating here today. In fact, many challenges preceded the current one, often with an unexpected positive outcome too. Over the course of your project, you dealt with the challenges of the COVID pandemic and its lockdowns, as the result of which you were not able to do the planned fieldwork in the US on American Sign Language and hearing gestures there. This challenge, however, may have been an opportunity in disguise, as it made you realize the value of more extensive research on Ghanaian Sign Language. This led to a unique and innovative combination of approaches involving historical linguistics, sociolinguistics, and linguistic ones. And the lockdown, of course, also enabled you, importantly, to spend more time with your family in Ghana. Your research initially addressed the question to what extent established sign languages, like Ghanaian Sign Language, are sensitive to their gestural environment. The case of GSL, Ghanaian Sign Language, seemed to be an ideal test case for this hypothesis, or this question, as it was understood to be a direct descendant of American Sign Language planted there in the 50s into a new gestural environment. Your research revealed that Ghanaian Sign Language indeed has similarities with the Ghanaian gestural environment. However, you also found that the notion of Ghanaian Sign Language was actually much more complex than we thought at first, involving a variety of repertoires. You propose that it includes the prestigious form called English, like this, and the more eclipsed varieties such as broken and local. This raised new questions about the route through which the observed similarities between Ghanaian Sign Language and its gestural environment came into being, directly in contact with gestures, or mainly through the sign language variety referred to as local and broken, perhaps. I am sure your observation about the pluriform nature of Ghanaian Sign Language, as well as the multidisciplinary methodology that you pioneered, will be used in follow-up studies. Dear Tim, your PhD trajectory was an exciting and inspiring journey, and I'm sure your family is grateful that it has come to completion today. I hope we will all be celebrating your new title together, and we will arrange for a proper celebration in Leiden at a later moment, and I hope you will celebrate it already with everyone in Ghana today. Thank you for the path we walked together, and I wish you lots of luck and happiness on your future path, or, to say it in Twi, Mimawun Tininkwa.
Thank you very much. It's an agreeable duty for me, very learned Dr. Hadjah, to congratulate you upon your degree, also on behalf of the university and its Council of Deans. And before we leave this auditorium, I would like to give the external opponents a short moment for congratulating the candidate, the new doctor, and you have the opportunity now. Dr. Alankik. Professor George Alankik.
Oh, okay. Thank you for the opportunity. Timothy, you have come very far. We journeyed together in this sign language world. When you were doing your BA, I was with you. And when you did your MPhil in linguistics, working on the morphology of Ghanaian Sign Language, I was with you. I'd like to congratulate the supervisors who took you through what you did for your PhD. The thesis is an attestation that you did a very good job. And we are so excited here in Legon. We can't wait to have you back here to join the team here at Legon to help us teach Ghanaian Sign Language to the next generation of students. Congratulations, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one. Dr. Hope Morgan.
Timothy, congratulations. This is wonderful. Wow, it's just thinking back on the during the pandemic and when we were before you went back to Ghana, when we met in the park at a distance, and just thinking about where you were at that point and what you were focusing on, and to see how far the thesis came and how your ideas developed, and how, as Dr. Nis said, you overcame the challenge of not being able to go to the United States, which was such an interesting proposal. But then you turned this into something really of great value that I see being applied in where I study as well. So it was a pleasure to read your thesis, and I'm so happy for you. And I look forward to seeing you in person one of these days soon. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And herewith, I declare this ceremony. Oh, sorry. You want also to congratulate? Or?
Is that possible to add my congratulations in before we formally close?
Yeah, if it's a short.
Thank you very much. I would like to just offer my huge congratulations for this fantastic achievement. Your thesis has been so impressive in terms of the ethics of your thesis. How you work together with the community in Ghana is extremely impressive. And we'll see what you do now in the future. And I'm sure I will continue to work with you, and you will continue to work with the community, and things will just go from strength to strength. So well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And herewith, I declare this ceremony closed.
Dr. Timothy.
Well,